Hi, this is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, and I'm here with another Friday Reads. I've had a great reading week, so let's jump in. First up, I just finished Unlikely Animals by Annie Hartnett. So a lot of my reading right now is for Booktopia. This is an annual event that my mother and I attend in Vermont the first weekend of May, every year that it's held so far. It takes place at the Northshire Bookstore in Manchester, Vermont. There are still tickets available. And the bookstore chooses usually about 8 different authors who have new books coming out or just recently released. And it's a weekend of just readers and authors hanging out together. It's a lot of fun. So this was one of the Booktopia books for this year. And if you want to know more about Booktopia, I'll include down below a link to my video wrap-up from last year's Booktopia, as well as a link to the bookstore if you're interested in joining the event yourself. So, Unlikely Animals by Annie Hartnett. This is my favorite Booktopia book so far. I loved this book. It is quirky. It's a little strange. For starters, it is narrated by the residents of a town cemetery. And yes, they're dead. So it's a little odd, but it's one of those books that is just warm and funny, and I just loved every minute of it. I couldn't wait to get back to these characters when I set it down. 22-year-old Emma is returning back to her hometown, a small town in New Hampshire. Her parents think she's been in medical school, but in fact, she never started. So she's got a big secret she's bringing back home with her. She's coming home to figure out what's next in her life, but also because her father is dying. He's got some sort of undiagnosed brain condition. Doctors aren't sure exactly what's going on, but he's seeing hallucinations and he's declining. So Emma has come back home. Her brother Augie also lives at home. He is recently out of rehab for the second time. So this family is dealing with a lot. A lot of what her father hallucinates are animals, and also a dead naturalist from the area. So it's really interesting. In the author's note, Hartnett explains that parts of this come from real life. So she said she didn't want to write historical fiction. She wanted to write a modern novel, but she wound some history into it by incorporating this ghost. So the book includes some photos. That's actually an author's note, but it includes some photos and excerpts of writing from this real-life naturalist who lived in this area of New Hampshire. He was named Ernest Harold Baines, and he had a lot of animals in his home, including this fox that he kept as a pet, and a bear. Like, not just small animals. So this is all woven into the story. So Emma's dad can see Harold, this naturalist, his ghost, and he talks to him. And he can also often see animals, which is how his brain disease came to light. He's a professor in the local college, and one day he started screaming about all the cats in the room. Of course, there were no cats. So anyway, so this is what Emma comes home to. Things are kind of in chaos. Her family's going through a lot. Emma gets a temporary job filling in as a substitute teacher for the 5th grade classroom in the local elementary school because their 5th grade teacher is busy supporting her husband, who is on trial for drug dealing. And that is another theme throughout this, a little more serious theme about the opioid crisis. That is what Augie was dealing with. That's what he went to rehab for. And also Emma's best friend from high school, Crystal, has gone missing. And she was like a part of their family. So her dad has really become obsessed with finding Crystal. She's been gone now for over a year. Most people have stopped looking. She was also an addict, and so, you know, they just think she either ran away or died. But Emma's father has never stopped looking for her. So he's putting up missing posters all over town, which is driving everyone in town crazy. Emma and Crystal had had a falling out, but, you know, when Emma finds out she's been missing, it really affects her. So all of this is going on. The story follows Emma and her family, but also the entire town. As I said, it's narrated by the residents of the cemetery, so they know everything that's going on in town. It is a delightful book. It is warm-hearted and poignant. It does touch on some serious issues, but it's also very, very funny. And it's uplifting. It's got a great ending. So that's Unlikely Animals by Annie Hartnett. And last night, I just started another Booktopia book, A Flaw in the Design by Nathan Oates. I really just started this. I've only read the first couple of chapters. So the setup is, this one is set in Vermont. You do tend to get a lot of New England authors at Booktopia. It is described on the back as a psychological thriller. Gil and his wife live with their two daughters, who are 11 and 15, in a small town in Vermont. They moved there from New York City years ago. So Gil had a falling out with his sister 6 years ago, hasn't seen her since, but his sister and her husband just died in a horrible car crash and left behind their 17-year-old son, Matthew. So they had designated Gil and his wife as Matthew's guardians in their wills. So Matthew comes to live with them. Now, they were very wealthy, his parents. They lived on the Upper West Side. He went to a prep school in the city, and he's coming to this small town in Vermont. So there's a lot going on there. In the beginning of the book, he's just arriving. Gil goes to pick him up at the airport. A lot of adjustment for the whole family, and especially for Matthew, who's just lost his parents. But you can tell right from the beginning, there's something going on behind the scenes. Gil and his wife are extra nervous about Matthew coming to visit. They allude to something that happened 6 years ago that caused the rift between he and his sister. Seems like it had to do with their 11-year-old daughter and with Matthew. And that's all I know so far. So that's just the setup, but you can already feel the tension, and that the tone of this is going to be menacing with this underlying tension. So just started it, but that's A Flaw in the Design by Nathan Oates, another of my books for Booktopia. Next up, I fit in another graphic memoir, In Limbo by Deb J.J. Lee. This is a coming-of-age novel about the author's years in high school. It is also about her feeling caught between two different cultures. She was born in Korea, and her parents are Korean, but she's grown up in New Jersey, and she's got some issues with her identity, with fitting in. She's dealing with some mental health issues, depression, anxiety, some self-harm. There is a suicide attempt in this memoir. And so it's all about Deb's process of coming to terms with what she's dealing with, learning to accept herself, and healing. So it is dark in some places, but it does end on a very positive note. It's always hard to show pictures on the iPad on camera, but you can see It's in black and white. There's her first day in high school. Very stress-inducing. So I really enjoyed this. It's an excellent memoir, and it does delve into some really important issues. That's In Limbo by Deb J.J. Lee. And finally, on audio, I am just finishing the afterword of This Is Our Place by Vitor Martins. This is set in Brazil, which is why I can't pronounce his name very well. And I have loved this book. So this is YA. It's a novel. And another unusual narrator. The house is narrating in this case. So it's stories of 3 different gay teenagers, each set 10 years apart, 2000, 2010, and 2020. But what ties these kids together is that they're all living in the same house at different times. So the house is the narrator, 8 Sunflower Street. So in 2000, we have a 17-year-old girl named Anna. She and her father celebrate the turning of the millennium on New Year's Eve. And then the next day, her dad breaks it to her that they're going to have to move. Anna has lived her whole life in this house and in this town. She knows nothing else. And she's also got a girlfriend, and things are going really well. And so she's devastated by this news that they have to move. Her father works on computers, so that's kind of an interesting twist here, because it is 2000 when most homes did not have computers, but they did. And then in 2010, we've got Greg, who lives in Sao Paulo, but his parents are getting divorced. They haven't said anything about it, but he knows what's going on. They've sent him to spend some time with his aunt in this small town, and she lives in this house. So it's 2010. His aunt runs a video rental service out of her garage, which business is quickly fading as streaming begins to become popular. And so Greg is living in the house. He's helping his aunt out with her video store and with maybe deciding what she can do as her next phase. And Greg yearns for his first kiss. There's a boy who's I think the son of one of the aunt's friends who comes by. Greg takes care of the video rental store during the day while his aunt is working. And this boy comes by every day to deliver his lunch for him. So there's perhaps a budding love story embedded in that one as well. And finally, in 2020, we have Beto. It's 2020, so it's the pandemic. He is stuck in the house, the same house, with his mother and his older sister. She was out on her own, but she was all by herself once the pandemic started. So she's come home. So the 3 of them are in lockdown together. Beto is becoming closer with his sister during this time and with his mother. He has been connected virtually with a boy that he really likes, Nico, but he doesn't know how to tell him because they can't see each other right now. He doesn't know how to tell him that he actually has feelings for him. So we've got 3 different stories in 3 different decades, all taking place in the same house, all dealing with gay teens at the center. There are issues of friendship, of first love, of family. It's a wonderful story. And the narrative moves back and forth between the decades so that you see all of these stories unfolding at once. I have just loved this. It's been wonderful on audio. So This Is Our Place. And that's what I'm reading this week. I would love to hear what you're reading. Let me know in the comments down below what books you are reading or plan to read this weekend.